Imagine walking through a forest where ancient stones peek through emerald leaves. The air is thick with humidity and the gentle sounds of tropical birds. Here, beneath centuries of growth, lie the remnants of one of history's most fascinating civilizations. The Maya built cities that touched the sky, developed mathematics that predicted eclipses, and created a way of life that flourished for over 1,000 years. But what happened to them? This is not a story of sudden catastrophe or dramatic endings. Instead, it is a gentle exploration of how a great civilization slowly transformed, like morning mist gradually lifting from a peaceful lake. Tonight, we will walk together through the daily rhythms that sustained the Maya people for generations, discovering the calm wisdom embedded in their ancient rituals and simple living. As you settle into comfort, let your breathing slow. The mystery we explore tonight is not one of fear or urgency, but of understanding how civilizations, like seasons, naturally change and evolve. The Maya collapse, as historians call it, was really a gradual transformation that unfolded over decades, as gentle and inevitable as water wearing smooth stones in a river. Close your eyes and imagine the warmth of tropical sunlight filtering through temple stones. Feel the peace that comes from understanding that all things, even great civilizations, follow natural cycles of growth, flourishing, and quiet transformation. Each day in the Maya world began before sunrise, just as yours might begin now in peaceful rest. In cities like Tikal and Palenque, the first light would find priests already moving slowly through stone corridors, their bare feet making soft sounds against cool limestone floors. These morning rituals were not hurried ceremonies, but gentle, repetitive actions that connected each day to the eternal cycles they observed in the sky. The head priest would ascend the temple steps one by one, counting each step as part of his meditation. 37 steps to the main platform, 13 more to the inner sanctum. Each number held meaning, but more importantly, each step was a moment of calm preparation for the day ahead. The priest carried with him a small clay vessel containing copal incense, the sweet resin that would burn slowly throughout the morning ceremony. In the pre-dawn darkness, families in the residential compounds were also beginning their quiet morning routines. Maya homes were simple structures built around central courtyards, designed to promote the circulation of cool air and the sense of community that came from shared spaces. A typical family compound housed 3 generations, their lives intertwined in patterns that had remained unchanged for centuries. The grandmother of the household would be the first to wake, rising while the stars still provided the only light. Her movements were slow and deliberate as she made her way to the central fire pit. The ashes from the previous day's fire still held warmth, and she would carefully coax new flames from the glowing embers using dried palm fronds and small sticks of cecropia wood. The fire was never allowed to die completely, for it represented the continuity of family and tradition. As the flames grew stronger, casting dancing shadows on the plastered walls, the grandmother would begin preparing the morning meal. Maya cuisine was based on the sacred trilogy of corn, beans, and squash, plants that had sustained their ancestors for millennia. The preparation of corn was itself a ritual that began each day with the same careful steps. First, the dried corn kernels would be placed in a large ceramic pot with water and lime. The lime, made from burning limestone in carefully tended fires, would soften the corn kernels overnight. This process, called nixtamalization, was both practical and sacred, transforming the simple grain into something more nutritious and easier to digest. The Maya understood this transformation as a metaphor for the cycles of death and rebirth that governed all life. While the corn soaked, the grandmother would grind cocoa beans on a metate, the volcanic stone grinding platform that was passed down through generations. The rhythmic sound of stone against stone created a peaceful percussion that marked the beginning of each day. The ground cocoa would be mixed with water and honey to create a frothy drink that the Maya considered food for both body and spirit. As the sun began to appear on the horizon, painting the stone pyramids in shades of gold and amber, other members of the household would begin to stir. The awakening of a Maya community was a gradual process, like flowers opening slowly to the morning sun. There was no urgency, no rush to begin the day's activities. Time moved differently in the Maya world, measured not by the demanding tick of mechanical clocks, but by the gentle progression of natural cycles. Children would emerge from their sleeping mats, rubbing their eyes and moving toward the warmth of the central fire. Maya children learned patience from their earliest years, watching and participating in the slow, methodical preparation of food, the careful tending of plants, and the respectful observance of daily rituals. They understood that good things came to those who waited, who observed, and who moved in harmony with the rhythms of nature. The father of the household, a skilled stone carver, would begin his day by examining his tools. Maya craftsmen took great pride in their implements, knowing that the quality of their work depended on the care they gave to their equipment. Stone chisels were sharpened on wet stones, their edges tested with gentle finger touches. Wooden handles were checked for cracks or splinters, then rubbed with plant oils to keep the wood supple and strong. This daily inspection of tools was more than practical maintenance. It was a form of meditation that prepared the craftsman's mind for the focused work ahead. Each tool had its own character and purpose. The fine chisels for detailed facial features on stele, the broader chisels for removing larger sections of stone, the wooden mallets with their different weights and balances. A master craftsman knew his tools as intimately as a musician knows his instruments. The Maya understanding of time was perhaps their greatest achievement, and it permeated every aspect of their daily life. Unlike our modern calendar, with its arbitrary divisions and secular holidays, the Maya calendar was a living system that connected each day to cosmic patterns and agricultural cycles. Every Maya citizen, from the humblest farmer to the most powerful ruler, organized their life according to these carefully calculated rhythms. The daykeeper, a respected member of the community whose job it was to track the passage of time, would consult his bark paper books each morning. These codices, painted with intricate glyphs and astronomical observations, were the repositories of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. The daykeeper read not just the date, but the spiritual and practical significance of the current day within the larger patterns of time. Some days were favorable for planting, others for harvesting. Certain days called for quiet reflection and ceremony. Others encouraged community gatherings and celebration. The Maya lived their lives in conscious harmony with these cycles, never fighting against time, but always flowing with its currents like leaves floating on a gentle stream. On this particular morning, the daykeeper noted that the current day fell within a period dedicated to Examna, the creator god associated with writing and learning. This meant that scribes would spend extra time on their craft, students would focus more intently on their lessons, and the community would show special reverence for books and knowledge. The rhythm of the day would adjust subtly to honor these cosmic influences. As the morning light strengthened, our stone carver would make his way to his workshop, located in a shaded area near the main plaza. Maya stone carvers were among the most skilled artisans in the ancient world, capable of transforming hard limestone into works of art that have survived centuries of tropical weather and vegetation growth. Their techniques were passed down through generations, each master training apprentices in methods that emphasized patience, precision, and respect for the stone itself. The carver would begin by selecting the stone for the day's work. This was never a rushed decision. He would walk among the available blocks, some freshly quarried from nearby outcrops, others that had been seasoning for months or years in the workshop yard. Each stone had its own character, determined by the conditions under which it formed millions of years ago. Some limestone was soft and easy to carve, but might crumble under detailed work. Other stones were harder and more durable, but required more patience and skill to shape. The selection process involved multiple senses. The carver would look at the stone's color and texture, noting variations that might indicate internal weaknesses or particularly hard spots. He would tap the stone gently with a wooden mallet, listening to the tone it produced. A clear, resonant tone indicated solid stone throughout. A dull or hollow sound might reveal hidden cracks or voids. The carver would run his hands over the stone's surface, feeling for irregularities that might affect the planned design. Once a stone was selected, the actual carving process could begin. Maya stone carvers worked without the metal tools that would later revolutionize stonework in other parts of the world. Instead, they relied on stone chisels, wooden mallets, and abrasive materials like sand and crushed quartz. This made the work slow but also meditative, requiring the carver to maintain focus and patience throughout each step of the process. The first step was always roughing out the basic form, using broad chisels and heavy mallets. The carver would remove large sections of unwanted stone, gradually revealing the general shape hidden within the raw block. This phase of the work produced clouds of limestone dust that filled the workshop with a fine white powder that coated everything in a light film. The dust caught the sunlight streaming through the workshop openings, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that seemed appropriate for the creation of sacred art. As the rough form emerged, the carver would switch to progressively finer tools. Medium chisels would refine the basic shapes, adding curves and angles that brought the sculpture closer to its final form. Fine chisels would add details like facial features, textile patterns, and hieroglyphic inscriptions. The finest work required chisels no wider than a pencil, used with gentle taps that removed tiny flakes of stone with each strike. While craftsmen worked in their workshops, farmers were engaged in their own daily rituals in the fields surrounding the city. Maya agriculture was a complex system that combined practical knowledge with spiritual beliefs, creating a sustainable relationship with the land that supported large populations for centuries. The collapse of Maya civilization was closely linked to the disruption of these agricultural rhythms, making their farming practices especially relevant to understanding what happened to this remarkable culture. Maya farmers practiced what modern agriculturalists call polyculture together in carefully planned combinations. The famous milpa system combined corn, beans, and squash in a mutually beneficial relationship that enriched the soil while maximizing yield. Corn stalks provided support for climbing bean vines. Bean roots fixed nitrogen in the soil, fertilizing the corn and squash. Squash vines spread along the ground, their large leaves shading the soil to retain moisture and prevent weed growth. This agricultural system required intimate knowledge of soil conditions, weather patterns, and plant biology. Maya farmers could read the landscape like a book, recognizing subtle variations in soil color, drainage, and vegetation that indicated the best locations for different crops. They understood that successful farming was not about conquering nature, but about working in partnership with natural processes. The daily routine of Maya farmers began before dawn, when the air was cool and the plants were still heavy with dew. Early morning was considered the best time for delicate work, like transplanting seedlings or harvesting tender vegetables. The farmers would walk slowly through their fields, examining each plant with the careful attention of a parent checking on sleeping children. Maya farming tools were simple but effective. Digging sticks, made from hardwood and fire-hardened at the tips, could penetrate even the toughest soil. Stone hoes hafted to wooden handles with plant fiber cordage could break up clods and create smooth planting surfaces. Baskets woven from palm fronds or other plant materials carried seeds, tools, and harvested crops. The work itself was rhythmic and meditative. Planting corn involved making small holes in the prepared soil with the digging stick, dropping in 3 or 4 kernels, and covering them with loose earth. The motion was repeated hundreds of times across each field, creating a steady rhythm that synchronized the farmer's body with the work. Experienced farmers could plant at a steady pace for hours, their movements becoming almost automatic as their minds wandered to other thoughts or entered states of peaceful meditation. Water was the foundation of Maya civilization, and the management of this precious resource was both a practical necessity and a spiritual calling. In the limestone landscape of the Yucatan Peninsula, surface water was scarce except during the rainy season. The Maya depended on cenotes' natural sinkholes that provided access to underground rivers and lakes. These cenotes were not just water sources. They were considered sacred portals to the underworld and played crucial roles in Maya religious and social life. The daily rituals surrounding water collection and use were elaborate affairs that acknowledged the sacred nature of this life-giving substance. Each morning, designated water carriers would make their way to the nearest cenote, carrying large ceramic vessels designed specifically for transporting water. These vessels, called alas, were works of art in their own right, decorated with painted designs and shaped with careful attention to both function and beauty. The journey to the cenote was never hurried. Water carriers understood that they were participating in a sacred act that connected them to the gods and ancestors who controlled the flow of water through the earth. They would walk slowly along well-worn paths, often stopping at small shrines to leave offerings of flowers, incense, or small carved jade ornaments. At the cenote, the water collection process followed strict protocols that had been established over generations. The carriers would first purify themselves by washing their hands and faces in the sacred water. They would then offer prayers to Chok, the rain god, and other deities associated with water and fertility. They would walk slowly along well-worn paths, often stopping at small shrines to leave offerings of flowers, incense, or small carved jade ornaments. At the cenote, the water collection process followed strict protocols that had been established over generations. The carriers would first purify themselves by washing their hands and faces in the sacred water. They would then offer prayers to Chok, the rain god, and other deities associated with water and fertility. Only after these preliminary rituals could the actual collection of water begin. The cenotes themselves were extraordinary natural formations. Some were open pools surrounded by limestone cliffs, their clear blue water reflecting the sky and surrounding vegetation. Others were partially covered by rock overhangs, creating cathedral-like spaces where sunlight filtered through openings in the ceiling to illuminate underwater passages that seemed to lead into the Earth's deepest mysteries. The Maya believed that these underground waterways connected to the realm of the gods, and they treated the cenotes with corresponding reverence. Swimming in sacred cenotes was forbidden except for certain ritual purposes. The water was drawn using specially consecrated vessels and ropes that were used for no other purpose. Every drop was considered precious, not just because of its practical value, but because of its spiritual significance. Maya textile production was another daily activity that combined practical necessity with artistic expression and spiritual significance. Women throughout Maya society spent portions of each day spinning cotton fibers into thread, dyeing thread with plant and mineral pigments, and weaving textiles on backstrap looms that could be set up anywhere there was space to work. The backstrap loom was a simple but ingenious device that allowed weavers to create complex patterns and designs with remarkable precision. One end of the loom was tied to a fixed object, like a tree or house post. The other end was attached to a strap that went around the weaver's lower back. By leaning forward or backward, the weaver could adjust the tension on the warp threads, creating the perfect conditions for inserting the weft threads that formed the fabric. Setting up a backstrap loom was itself a meditative process that required patience and attention to detail. The warp threads, which would form the foundation of the textile, had to be measured precisely and arranged in the correct order to create the desired pattern. This setup process could take several hours for complex designs, but Maya weavers approached it with the same calm focus they brought to all their daily activities. Once the loom was prepared, the actual weaving could begin. Maya weavers worked without written patterns, instead carrying the designs in their memory and passing them down through generations of mothers teaching daughters. Each family and region had its own traditional patterns, many of which carried symbolic meanings related to Maya cosmology and religious beliefs. The rhythm of weaving was soothing and repetitive. The weaver would separate the warp threads, insert the weft thread, beat it down with a wooden sword-like tool called a batten, and then repeat the process. Hour after hour, the textile would grow thread by thread, the pattern emerging gradually like a photograph developing in a dark room. Maya weavers often worked in groups, gathering in shaded courtyards or under the porticos of residential compounds. The social aspect of weaving was as important as the production of cloth. Women would share news, tell stories, discuss family matters, and pass on traditional knowledge while their hands maintained the steady rhythm of the loom. Children playing nearby would absorb this cultural transmission, learning not just the technical aspects of textile production, but also the social patterns and values that held Maya communities together. Trade was the lifeblood of Maya civilization, connecting far-flung communities and distributing goods across vast distances. The great Maya cities were not just ceremonial centers, but also major commercial hubs, where merchants from different regions would gather to exchange products ranging from basic necessities to exotic luxury items. The daily rhythms of these marketplaces provide insight into the economic foundations that supported Maya society and whose disruption contributed to the civilization's gradual transformation. Maya markets operated on regular schedules tied to the sacred calendar. Market days were calculated according to the 260-day ritual calendar, with major trading sessions occurring at intervals that allowed merchants from distant locations to plan their journeys accordingly. This system created a predictable rhythm that facilitated long distance trade while respecting the religious significance of different calendar periods. The setup of a Maya marketplace began before dawn on market days. Merchants who had traveled from other cities would have arrived the previous evening, camping in designated areas outside the city center with their goods and pack animals. Local vendors would begin arranging their stalls while the stars were still visible, working by torchlight to display their wares before the first customers arrived. Maya marketplaces were organized according to strict spatial principles that reflected social hierarchies and product categories. The most prestigious merchants, those dealing in luxury goods like jade, obsidian, and exotic feathers, occupied the prime locations near the main plaza and ceremonial buildings. Local food vendors and craftsmen selling everyday items were arranged in secondary areas, while the most basic products like firewood and construction materials were sold in peripheral zones. The products available in a Maya marketplace represented the full spectrum of Mesoamerican production. Obsidian blades from volcanic regions hundreds of miles away lay beside locally made ceramic vessels. Cacao beans from tropical lowlands were traded alongside salt from coastal evaporation ponds. Precious jade ornaments from highland quarries shared display space with colorful feathers from tropical birds that lived in distant rainforests. Each product category had its own traditional methods of display and evaluation. Obsidian blades were arranged on soft cotton cloths that showed off their translucent edges and prevented damage from casual handling. Jade ornaments were sorted by color and quality, with the most prized deep green pieces occupying positions of honor. Cacao beans were displayed in standardized measuring bowls, allowing customers to judge both quantity and quality at a glance. As we move deeper into our exploration of Maya daily life, it becomes important to understand how the gradual changes in these everyday routines signaled the transformation that historians call the Maya collapse. This was not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow erosion of the systems that had sustained Maya civilization for centuries. The first signs of trouble appeared in the agricultural sector. Maya farmers began to notice subtle changes in the reliability of rainfall patterns that had been consistent for generations. Dry seasons lasted longer than expected. Wet seasons brought either too much rain, causing flooding and erosion, or too little rain, leaving crops withered in the fields. These changes forced farmers to modify their planting schedules and crop selections, disrupting agricultural routines that had remained stable for centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests that Maya communities responded to these challenges with remarkable ingenuity and persistence. Farmers developed new techniques for water conservation, building elaborate terraces and canal systems to capture and distribute rainfall more effectively. They experimented with crop varieties that were more resistant to drought and began to supplement their traditional milpa agriculture with intensive kitchen gardens that could be watered by hand during dry periods. However, these adaptations required significant investments of labor and resources. Communities had to allocate more workers to agricultural projects, reducing the number of people available for other activities like construction, craft production, and long-distance trade. The magnificent building projects that had characterized the height of Maya civilization became increasingly difficult to complete as communities focused their efforts on basic survival. The changes in agricultural productivity also affected the complex trade networks that connected Maya cities. Communities that had previously produced surplus goods for export found themselves struggling to meet their own basic needs. The flow of exotic materials that had sustained specialized craft industries began to slow, making it difficult for skilled artisans to obtain the raw materials they needed for their work. Rather than simply collapsing, Maya communities showed remarkable resilience in adapting to changing conditions. This adaptation period, lasting several decades in most regions, saw the gradual transformation of Maya society as people developed new ways of organizing their lives and communities. One of the most significant changes was the decentralization of political and economic power. The great cities that had dominated Maya civilization for centuries began to lose their central importance as smaller communities developed greater self-sufficiency. Local leaders emerged to coordinate regional responses to environmental and economic challenges, while the authority of traditional rulers, based in major ceremonial centers, gradually weakened. This political transformation was reflected in changes to daily routines throughout Maya society. Craftsmen who had previously specialized in producing goods for elite consumption found new markets. Among common people who could afford simpler versions of traditional luxury items, farmers who had grown cash crops for long-distance trade shifted to producing food for local consumption. Merchants adapted their routes and inventory to serve the needs of smaller, more localized markets. The ritual calendar, which had previously coordinated activities across vast regions, began to fragment as different communities developed their own local variations. This process was gradual and subtle, involving small changes in the timing of ceremonies, modifications to traditional rituals, and the emergence of new religious practices that addressed local concerns and conditions. What historians call the Maya collapse was really a transformation process that unfolded over several generations. Communities that had been part of a vast, interconnected civilization gradually became more isolated and self-sufficient. This process was not necessarily traumatic for the people living through it, as it involved the gradual modification of existing practices rather than their sudden abandonment. Daily life in Maya communities during this transformation period retained many of its traditional elements while adapting to new circumstances. Farmers continued to use the milpa system but modified it to work with less predictable rainfall. Craft production continued but shifted toward goods that could be produced with locally available materials. Religious ceremonies continued but were adapted to address new concerns about water, food security, and community survival. The great stone monuments that had recorded Maya achievements began to tell different stories. Instead of celebrating military victories or astronomical observations, later inscriptions focused on more immediate concerns like successful harvests, the completion of water management projects, and the maintenance of community solidarity in difficult times. The transformation of Maya civilization was ultimately successful in ensuring the survival of Maya culture, even as the great cities were gradually abandoned. Maya communities persisted in rural areas throughout the colonial period and continue to exist today, maintaining many of the traditions and practices that had sustained their ancestors for millennia. As we contemplate the Maya transformation, we can find wisdom relevant to our own lives. The Maya showed us that resilience comes not from rigidly maintaining old ways of doing things, but from thoughtfully adapting traditional practices to meet new challenges. They demonstrated that communities can survive major changes by focusing on what truly matters: sustainable relationships with the environment, strong social bonds, and the preservation of essential cultural knowledge. The daily routines that sustained Maya civilization for over 1,000 years were not just practical activities, but expressions of a worldview that emphasized harmony, balance, and respect for natural cycles. When these routines became unsustainable due to environmental changes, the Maya adapted them rather than abandoning them entirely. This flexibility allowed their culture to survive even as their political and economic systems transformed. Modern people facing their own challenges can learn from the Maya example. The key is to identify the essential elements that make life meaningful and sustainable, while remaining flexible about the specific forms these elements take. Just as Maya farmers adapted their planting schedules while maintaining their commitment to sustainable agriculture, we can adapt our own practices while preserving the values and relationships that give our lives meaning. As our journey through Maya daily life moves toward its conclusion, we turn to the evening rituals that marked the end of each day and prepared communities for the peaceful rest that restored their energy for the next day's activities. Maya evening routines were characterized by the same calm deliberation that marked all aspects of their daily life. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the plazas and residential compounds. Maya families would gather around their central fire pits for the evening meal. This was not a hurried affair, but a leisurely time for sharing food, discussing the day's events, and strengthening family bonds through conversation and storytelling. The preparation of the evening meal followed traditional patterns that had been refined over generations. Corn tortillas made from the nixtamalized corn prepared that morning were cooked on ceramic griddles placed over the fire. The tortillas were served warm, their aroma filling the compound and signaling to all residents that the day's work was ending and the time for rest and reflection had begun. Other foods were prepared using cooking techniques that required patience and attention. Beans were slowly simmered in ceramic pots, their cooking liquid gradually thickening into a rich sauce flavored with local herbs and chili peppers. Squash and other vegetables were roasted directly in the coals of the fire, their skins charring while their interiors became sweet and tender. The evening meal was accompanied by discussions of the day's activities and plans for the following day. Children would report on their lessons and play activities. Adults would share information about their work progress and any unusual events they had witnessed. Elders would offer advice and perspective based on their accumulated experience and knowledge. After the evening meal, Maya communities would settle into nighttime routines that acknowledged their deep connection to astronomical cycles. The Maya were among history's most accomplished astronomers, and their observations of celestial movements informed both their practical activities and their spiritual beliefs. Community astronomers would climb to the tops of pyramids and observation platforms to conduct their nightly studies of star positions and planetary movements. These observations were not just scientific activities, but spiritual practices that connected the observers to the cosmic order that governed all life. The astronomers worked with remarkable precision, tracking subtle changes in celestial positions and recording their observations on bark paper codices that served as permanent records of accumulated knowledge. The information gathered during these nightly observations influenced many aspects of Maya daily life. Agricultural schedules were planned according to the positions of specific star groups. Religious ceremonies were timed to coincide with significant astronomical events. Even personal decisions about marriage, travel, and major purchases were often made with reference to astrological considerations based on the current positions of celestial bodies. For ordinary Maya citizens, the night sky provided a source of wonder and comfort rather than scientific data. Families would often spend time after the evening meal sitting in their courtyards, looking up at the stars and sharing traditional stories about the constellations and their significance in Maya mythology. These storytelling sessions helped preserve cultural knowledge while providing entertainment and education for children. The Maya identified numerous constellations and tracked their movements throughout the year. Each constellation had its own story and significance, creating a rich mythology that connected earthly activities to cosmic patterns. The Scorpion constellation was associated with agricultural cycles and the timing of planting activities. The Turtle constellation was connected to creation stories and the emergence of life from primordial waters. As our exploration of Maya daily life draws to a close, we can appreciate how the rhythms and routines that sustained this remarkable civilization embodied principles that remain relevant today. The Maya showed us that meaningful life comes from finding balance between practical activities and spiritual reflection, between individual needs and community responsibilities, between human ambitions and natural cycles. The transformation of Maya civilization teaches us that even the most successful societies must be willing to adapt when circumstances change. The Maya collapse was not a failure, but a successful adaptation to new environmental and social conditions. by maintaining their essential cultural values while modifying their specific practices. Maya communities ensured the survival of their culture even as their political and economic systems transformed. The daily routines we have explored together tonight represent a way of life that prioritized sustainability, community, and harmony with natural cycles. These principles offer guidance for anyone seeking to create a more balanced and meaningful existence in our modern world. Just as Maya farmers worked in partnership with natural cycles rather than fighting against them, we can learn to align our own activities with the rhythms that promote health, happiness, and long-term sustainability. The quiet wisdom embedded in Maya daily life reminds us that the most important activities are often the simplest ones. Preparing food with care and attention, maintaining strong relationships with family and community, observing the natural world with wonder and respect, and approaching each day's tasks with patience and deliberation. As you prepare for sleep tonight, carry with you the calm energy that pervaded Maya daily life. Let their example of balanced living inspire you to approach your own routines with greater mindfulness and appreciation. Remember that every ordinary activity, from preparing meals to tending plants to sharing stories with loved ones, can become a form of meditation and a connection to something larger than ourselves. The mystery of what happened to Maya civilization is ultimately the story of how a wise and adaptable people successfully navigated major changes while preserving what mattered most to them. Their legacy lives on, not just in the magnificent ruins they left behind, but in the timeless principles they embodied. The importance of community, the value of patience, and the wisdom of living in harmony with natural cycles. Now, as the peace that sustained Maya communities for over 1,000 years settles around you, let yourself drift into the same restful sleep that renewed their energy each night. Feel the calm that comes from understanding that all things, including civilizations, follow natural patterns of growth, flowering, and transformation. Rest in the knowledge that adaptation and change are not signs of failure, but expressions of the wisdom that allows life to continue in new forms. The gentle mystery of the Maya transformation surrounds you now like a soft blanket, bringing the deep peace that comes from connecting with the timeless rhythms that have sustained human communities throughout history. Let this peace carry you into dreams filled with the wisdom of ancient farmers, the skill of patient craftsmen, and the wonder of astronomers contemplating the eternal dance of stars across the night sky. Sleep well, knowing that you are part of the same great story of human adaptation and resilience that the Maya wrote with their lives. Their peaceful wisdom flows into your rest, bringing you the calm energy you need to meet tomorrow with the same balanced approach they brought to each new day. The mystery that began with curious questions about a vanished civilization ends with the timeless peace that connects all human experience across the centuries. In this quiet moment, as consciousness gently fades and sleep begins to embrace you, feel the presence of countless generations who have found the same peaceful rest you discover now. The Maya transformation continues in your own daily choices to live with greater awareness, patience, and harmony with the natural world that sustains us all. Rest now, enveloped in the tranquil mystery that is not really a mystery at all, but simply the eternal cycle of change and adaptation that allows life to continue in endless forms of beauty and wisdom. The peace that sustained the Maya people through centuries of daily routines now surrounds you with its gentle embrace, carrying you into the restorative sleep that prepares you for whatever transformations await in your own life's journey.